Hey, y'all. If you want to head to our website to check out all the different things Pizzazz offers, then just head to pizzazzart.com. That's PZAZZART.com. You will see our online memberships. We've got Kids Club memberships, our Lettering Club membership, our one project a month membership. We call that Paint and Praise. You will see some freebies that we've got there for you, and you'll see our local classes if you're local. So head to the website, check it out, pizzazzart.com, PZAZZART.com. Hey, y'all. This is Casey Hope with the Here's Hope podcast, and I'm excited to have a guest on today that I think you are going to like to hear what she has to say. She's got some great resources for you. Sarah Bragg, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so happy to be with you, Casey.
Yeah, so introduce yourself to our viewers who may not be familiar with you. Tell us who you are, what you do.
Well, I am in my mid 40s and I'm a wife and a mom. My girls, we're in that teenage years. So both of my girls, both of them will be in high school next school year. So we are just in that season where you feel like you're sort of running out of time, but also you're really excited about the next phase and the phase you're in. So we live in Southeast Tennessee. That's where I grew up, but I never imagined living here as an adult. But we just moved back after 2020 when I guess so many of us turned our lives upside down in 2020 and made changes. But I'm also an author and a podcaster. My podcast is called Surviving Sarah, and it's probably very similar to yours. I really wanted, my oldest is named Sinclair, and I started this when she was maybe 6 or 7, that podcast. And I wanted to title it Surviving Sinclair because I felt like that's what I was doing most days. But really, I'm just kind of surviving myself, and I want to be better. And I wanted to have conversations where I can learn and grow. And so that's what that is about. And then written a few books. The last book that came out recently was called A Mother's Guide to Raising Herself. That was a couple of years ago. And really, I started parenting thinking that it was about what I needed to do to raise them. And really, I learned that, parenting is just about me growing up. This is about the things that I've got to learn how to be better. And then the most recent book is called Is Everyone Happier Than Me? An honest guide to the questions that keep you up at night. So in midlife, if anyone is midlife or over, you're probably waking in the middle of the night. And I think that's what we're all doing. I just like to think a lot at night. So that's what that book is about.
Yeah, I think that title is so grabbing because truly, Is Everyone Happier Than Me is something that goes through our head, even subconsciously when we are looking at different things. And then, those questions that keep us up at night, like what are some of those big questions that you were asking? And you think that a lot of people are, because I think that saying them out loud shows everybody that, hey, you're not alone. Like you're not alone in thinking these things, these fears, these thoughts, like they're pretty common to a lot of us. So what were those big questions that a lot of us are asking ourselves?
Yeah, what's funny is when I wrote the book, my youngest was still earlier in middle school life, and I kind of felt like I was a middle schooler all over again. I really think we go back into middle school at different phases in life, but I was asking the same questions that she was asking. I can remember her sitting in her bed crying and asking those same questions. Is everyone happier than me? And I was like, yeah. And does anybody like me? I wasn't saying that back to her, but those are the questions that I'm asking at night is, does anybody like me? Do I matter anymore? Am I invisible? Will I always feel stuck? There just was so many things where, questions about my identity or questions about my worth or my place in this world. I just think, things start to change as we get older. And of course, this is the first time we've ever done this. It's not like we've had a chance to be older at a different stage in life and have figured it out. We're all learning it at the same time. And things change. Circumstances have a way of ushering us into different seasons. And so I just really found myself asking a lot of those questions because I was really wrestling with not feeling the way I wanted to feel in life and maybe wrestling with some grief or some disappointment around where I was in life and thinking I was going to be in a different place than what I was. Yeah, a lot of those questions just had to do with, I don't know, my feelings of being connected to myself and connected to others.
And so is that what ultimately led you to write this book? Like you just said, hey, I'm having these questions, let's explore it? Or what did that look like from being in that place of noticing, hey, I have got these questions that my daughter has got that are common to so many people at all ages and stages? Is that really what prompted you to write the book? Or what did that look like going from asking yourself these questions to then writing this book?
Yeah, I found myself in this season and it was coming out of 2020. So in 2020, I wrote A Mother's Guide to Raising Herself and then at the end of 2020, we moved from Atlanta, which had been my home my entire adult life, and we moved back to my hometown where I grew up. And so that was a big life change. Again, my girls were in middle school at the time, so that was a really strange time to uproot our kids and move them. And then, my book had come out in 2021. And then I just had all these things that on paper seemed to be, oh, you should be happy about this. Like you've left this tiny little house in Atlanta and now you have acreage and your girls are like, have all these other opportunities and you've got this book that can, like all these things on paper should have been happy.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself, people say, aren't you just so happy? And I was smiling, the fakest smiling, going, "Oh, yeah, totally." Like, I think they're expecting me to be happy, but I'm not. Like, inside, I just felt sad and lonely and just unhappy. And I thought, I don't want to feel those things. So,
Mm-hmm.
what do I want to feel? I started thinking about that and wrestling with that because those questions at night were kind of driving this. Because that's why I'm having all this angst at night because everyone wants me to be happy, but I'm actually not happy. As I started digging deeper onto what I really wanted to feel, I thought, well, I want to feel happy, but what does that even mean? I don't think feeling happy is like you can't feel happy all the time. Like I know that. I know that it's just sort of a feeling like any other feeling that we may have. And the more I dug and the more I read and the more I just researched and thought about it and sort of looked at my own life of what was missing and what I needed, it was really coming down to connection, that I needed to feel more connected to myself and I needed to feel more connected to other people. So I really started, every time I asked one of those questions, I really started looking at it through that filter of, okay, well, what do I need to do to help me feel more connected? That's what I started implementing in my life to find a little more happiness. It was
Mm-hmm.
really about connection.
I love that. Now, did you come to that conclusion on your own, or like during this time, were these just common thoughts, or do you think that you were going through any sort of depression? Like, because there's so many different ranges of people who are exactly how you're saying. They're like, everything is good on paper, but I'm not feeling happy. I think that is a pretty common thought. I think that we go through that, but I'm just curious, did you do any counseling, or was this just from observing your life and seeing this piece of connection is missing?
Well, I definitely there was a level of observation, but I also went to therapy. I remember getting to the place where I was like, okay, like I think I've carried myself far enough. Like I've done a lot of reading. I've done a lot of introspective work. I've done a lot of things, but I'm feeling like I need a little bit of professional help with navigating some of these things. Finally, I started seeing a therapist in I guess it was 2022. And then that helped process things that, it was funny. She was the one that brought to my attention the grief. She's like, I just feel like you have a lot to grieve. And I was like, oh, no, no. I'm fine. It's like, I wanted to just acknowledge that, yeah, that was a sad thing or that loss happened, but not really deal with the grief. I didn't really want to feel that. Like, I've already, like, cause actually I was feeling it, but I thought if I could just not acknowledge it, maybe I'm not actually feeling sad. Let's just kind of power through. Going to therapy really did help just to even have someone say, yeah, that's really hard. No wonder you feel sad. Because again, I wanted to just power through, but having someone else come alongside and say, I can see why you feel sad about that. I can see why you're not happy in this season of life. Therapy definitely was a big help for me in that season when I was really feeling low.
And I think that's so good. When you say grief, I think sometimes people think to the obvious of, having lost somebody, death, some of the big things that cause grief. But as you were saying that, I'm thinking there are so many little things that other people may not even know is going on in your life that you are grieving. You are grieving an end of a season. or even a job change. Like there's a little bit of grief that sometimes can come with that because it is the end of a season somewhere else. And I think that's really important what you just said. Like you've got to acknowledge it. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I think, I don't know if it was her counselor or somebody that was telling her, like, allow yourself. Oh, no, she said it was Priscilla Shire in one
Mm.
of the Bible studies that she was doing. Allow yourself to feel the grief, but put a time limit on it.
Hmm.
And I thought that
Yeah.
was great. I like, that is great. Like, yes, feel the emotions of the grief, whatever it is, whether it's a big life changing grief or a small change of seasons grief, like whatever it is, allow yourself that time to grieve and put a time limit on it.
I think that's a really important thing. That's one of the things that I've learned is to you just have to feel it. You have to allow yourself to feel it. So, for example, and I talk about this a lot in the book. It was really hard for me. Aging is not an easy thing for me. I think I always assumed I would just look young. I would always
Uh,
be young. I would always look
Amen.
young, right? And I remember hitting 40 and I was like, "See, I still got it. Everybody else might struggle, but I'm fine. Like I'm not, you know." And then 42 hit, and I was like, oh, this is what
Yeah.
everybody was talking about. I really struggled with that. And when my body was doing things that I was like, hello, we've always been able to operate like this and be
Hmm.
fine. So why are you all of a sudden not? I really struggled with that. And that was one of the hardest parts for me. And it sounds so superficial, but I
Oh,
think we all feel that angst of aging and our
yeah.
bodies are changing. And one of the things that I've worked on is feeling the sadness. There's been times where I've gotten dressed, or I guess most recently, I have to go to this formal wedding coming up, and I went and tried on dresses, and I just got in my car and I cried the entire drive home because I was just like, this is just not okay. And I remember thinking, it's okay. You need to let yourself cry. You
Hmm.
need to let yourself feel the sadness that you feel, but it is okay. Like I've kind of learned even some of the adopting a phrase that says, I don't want to be here, but this is where I am. Like, I am here. I don't want to be here, but I'm here. And coming to that present and just going, it's okay. You can be here and it can be sad in this moment, but then we're going to move on. And the grief comes back in again. We're going to feel it again, but it doesn't have to be something that I have to feel 24/7. I can
Right.
feel it when that feeling comes over me, and then I can move on. This next phrase is not one that I wrote. I can't remember who said it, but no feeling is final. You have to feel both kinds of emotions, the happy and the sad, to be human. You have to, in order to feel what happiness feels like, you have to have felt sad at some point. And so no feeling is final. You're going to, you can move through it, you can feel it, and then you can move on. And you might feel it again later, but then you can move on. And that's been a really helpful practice for me when it comes to that.
That's great. I love that because I feel like I love that phrase, no feeling is final. I've not heard that before, but I think that when you are in the sad, the down, the grief that sometimes you feel like you can't pull yourself out of, I feel like the lie that is whispered to you is that it is final, that this
Mm,
is going to break you. You
yeah.
know, like certain things that you feel like you are never going to get out of what you are in right now. And I think that is such a lie that we've got to fight against. So I love that. No feeling is final. Well, another thing that you hit on earlier was that you needed connection. So talk to us about that because we're in a world where we kind of feel connected everywhere we
Mhm.
look on social media, on email. Anybody can get us at any time. You know, we feel like we're overly connected, yet you're saying, like, no, I needed real connection. That's what was missing. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think you're so right. We live in a world where we are more connected than ever before. We can, we're on our phones, we are connected with people. When I was writing the book, I tallied up the people that I'm connected to online, and it was like over 17,000 people. And I thought, well, that's a lot of people. You would think I feel pretty connected. But in reality, I felt very lonely. And I think that for us, especially in different seasons of life, it is this way. But I think as we age, we embark on a lot more loneliness because you're just not in proximity like you once were. It's kind of like we can look back at our college days and think, I was so close to those friends. Well, you were because you spent 24/7 with them. You lived with them, you did everything with them. When my girls were little and like preschool and early elementary, I felt like I had great friendships because we were just doing stuff all the time with people. But as my girls have aged and as I have aged, you're just sort of out of that proximity. Even if you're still working, the chances are you're in a remote work situation. And so you're not working with people anymore. Or I think about my mom in the season that she's in, she's in her early 70s, and it's just a different season. She had these strong friendships through her 40s and her 50s, and now everybody's just in a different season, and it's a more lonely season. And so even though we could hop on social media and like a post or see what someone is doing, we still don't really feel connected. It's sort of this faux connection. And so I think that in those times when we feel really isolated or we feel really alone, I think we have to be really intentional about reaching out and trying to make connections. For me, I've kind of found friendship in unlikely places. We live on property and we had horses when we moved here. And my neighbor is at the time, she was 75. I was 43 when we moved here, and we just became friends because I needed a friend and she was next door and she had horses and I had horses and I could learn from her. Or I started working out at a gym because I needed to be around people and start to form friendships and meet people. Or I love reading books. And so a friend of mine, we started a book club and met people that way. I think we just have to start being really intentional about finding friends when we don't have that proximity for us.
Right. Yeah. And I love like those are very tangible things. You said you were the one reaching out. You
Yes.
started a book club. You thought about things to do to bring people together. And I think that is exactly like where some people are stuck. They know they want connection, but they're waiting for it to come to them. They're waiting for somebody to invite them to something. They are waiting for somebody to call them. Sometimes you see people getting bitter because nobody's including me. And then you've got to flip your thought process and think, who have you included lately? Who have
Right.
you invited over? Who have you reached out to have this connection? So I love that. Like you were proactive in this piece of, hey, I'm lonely. I'm not going to sit here and just be in my loneliness. I am going to be, like you said, intentional for reaching out. Do you have any other ideas for people who, because I feel like we just see this a lot, we
Yeah.
see just loneliness. We see
Yeah.
it really in all ages. I mean, really, because you
Yeah.
see all ages and stages have a certain degree of loneliness, like you just spoke about. Like right now, like yes, like I'm in the stage of working with just a few people, and I've got like my best friend that I will walk with, and then the people that I see at church. And
Yeah.
other than that, if they are not in that proximity, like there is that exactly what you just said. I'm just really reiterating what you just said.
Mhm.
Like there is that sense of loneliness. So what are some tangible other ideas that you have for people who may be like, yes, connection. This is it. This is what I need more of. They may have not even realized that until listening to this podcast that absolutely, yes, I've been isolated. So how do I create more connection? How do I be proactive? What are some ideas that I can start doing now to create that connection?
Yeah, I think you look at your interest and you look at your calendar. I have a friend who she was feeling this way strongly and she works for herself, but she decided to take a part-time job and I think her kids were like high school age. So she took a part-time job in the school as like in the front office. She's like, I didn't need the work. I work for myself. She's like, but I needed the connection. I needed to be
Mhm.
around people. And so she took that initiative to put herself in a place where she's just interacting with people. For instance, I've even told my mom, she doesn't need to work, but she has all this time on her hands. And I said, maybe go volunteer at that nonprofit that you love that's in town and they need volunteers. Go once or twice a week and put your time there. Finding your interest. So for me, I love tennis. I played tennis through college and then sort of hung up my racket for like 20 plus years. Just, left it behind. But when I was feeling this loneliness, I started looking at what I've once loved and what I used to just love to do was sports really in general, tennis specifically, but I didn't know anybody yet that played tennis because again, we were in like a new town. So I signed up for a pickleball clinic. I was like, I've never played pickleball.
Mhm.
It's all the rage. Let me like see what this is and like did the vulnerable thing of not knowing anybody and showing up to a clinic with like
Mhm.
20 other people, met people, started playing some pickleball with people because of that, then met some tennis players. And now I play tennis every week with these ladies and these men that are all, I think I'm the youngest, but it is so fun to now have this connection with all these people because of this common sport that I once loved. So I would look at what you're interested in and see if there's some way to make a connection with someone else through it. So whether that's, like I said, a sport or, I love reading fiction. And my friend and I that started the book club were like, there's got to be more people in this town that are like us that want to get together and that love books. And sure enough, there was like 30 people that showed up at the first book club. So I think that you just look at what you're interested in and look at your time. Like, how much time do you have to give? Do you have time to take a part time job somewhere or to volunteer somewhere? Or do you have time to, give to a hobby? Or I know for me, this also depends on your personality wiring. I'm a little bit more extroverted. My husband is very introverted. He could go days without speaking to anyone and be perfectly happy, where I'm like, I can go about 3 hours and then I need to speak to someone. I look at my calendar for the week and I just make sure that I have one thing a week that is with someone. So whether that's a walk or a coffee or whatever, I just need to be in person, like having a real conversation with someone every week. And so, again, that's looking at what you're interested in and what your calendar looks like and just making something happen.
I love that. Those are very practical, very tangible tips. As you're doing it, I'm like thinking through things in my life. And like when you said like the walking, I mentioned me walking with my best friend earlier. We haven't always done that. And it has been exactly what you're saying. Like we've just had to look at the calendar and it's sporadic because we are both,
Mhm.
she's got 5 kids. Got a busy work schedule, but it's we've gotten to put, hey, like let's just text and hey, can you meet at this time for a quick walk? And there is that connection. It might only be 30 minutes, but it's better than nothing, And so
Yes.
sometimes I think we feel like things have to be very planned, but sometimes a quick little text to somebody, you never know how much. Like, I mean, there have been many times where I'm like, thank you so much for texting today. I would not have done this without it. Like, just it can
Yes.
be very, impromptu as well. One of the things, we have an online membership where we teach art, and I tell people, like, hey, you've got all these art lessons, invite people over to do
Mm,
them with you. It's the same thing as what you're saying. Take your
yeah.
interest. If you're already interested in this, there's other people that are your friends that will be too. Invite them over to do it with you. I just think that's really great, tangible advice. And I love about your friend that went to work. I like the idea of
Mhm.
volunteering. And, sometimes I feel like I have to remember on the flip side of that, we have multiple people who have told us here at our studio because we pack a lot of boxes every month. And so we've had people say, well, let us know and we'll come help. Let us know and we'll come help. And there's part of me that feels like, well, no, I don't want you to volunteer. Like we'll pay our employees to do this. I don't want you to do that. But on the flip side, I need to be reminded
Mm,
that they want to for that interaction. They
yeah.
want to come help for that interaction. So I don't need to dismiss that or rob that
Yeah.
or anything. So that's just a good reminder on that side of it as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And again, as you were talking, I just was reminded, I just think sometimes we have to be the person who sees people. We want to be seen, but
Hmm.
sometimes we really have to just be the person that sees other people. And it's vulnerable to reach out. It's vulnerable to ask because you're like, what if they don't like me? Or what if they don't actually want to hang out with me? But we feel so alone. So
Hmm.
we have to risk it. It is worth the risk to find someone and to find connection because that really is what is going to make us feel happier in
Hmm.
life.
Hmm. I agree 100%. Well, this has been awesome. I have loved chatting with you. Please tell everybody where they can find your book. Again, remind them about your podcast. I think they're going to want to dive into a little bit more on this subject around finding happiness. Tell us all the places for all the
Yes.
things.
Thank you. Well, you can buy Is Everyone Happier Than Me anywhere you want to buy your books. It's kind of everywhere. My website is sarahbragg.com. That's SARAHBRAGG. And the podcast is Surviving Sarah. So you can find all kinds of conversations over there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It has been so good talking to you.
Same. Thank you for having me.
I hope y'all enjoyed that podcast. Y'all be sure to go like, subscribe this, leave a review. Let us know how you're liking it. We like that feedback. And if you want to follow us on other social platforms, on Instagram, it's Pizzazz Art Studio. Same for Facebook, and Pizzazz is P-Z-A-Z-Z. Pizzazz Art Studio. Go check us out and see what all we have to offer over there.